Hello and welcome along to the VMTV Rugby Pod. Well, where to start? The Aviva Stadium on Saturday. Alan, you were there. What a performance from Ireland, beating the world champions. Incredible, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a brilliant performance, I think. It was very physical. It was a real test for Ireland, exactly what I think we all probably wanted. The last time South Africa were in Dublin, we beat them 38-3, and we went on to have a great year the year after as well. 2018 World Cup was bad, so this is a build up to the World Cup, and I think Ireland were probably a little bit rusty in some of their execution, but it was a real physical test, and we've struggled against maybe France and England on occasions before with that real physicality. So this was exactly what Andy Farrell would have wanted. Given we had, James Lowe was missing, Robbie Henshaw, Bundy Aki, Gibson Park was just coming back, Ian Henderson is still out, Stuart McAvoy went off. So I think, and Tyke Furlong obviously gone off at half time. Finlay Bealham was outstanding, and it was a brilliant opportunity for him to really show what he can do. And he stood up to it. He was brilliant and deserves a huge amount of credit for his performance on Saturday against Kitsoff, and then Oxenshea when he came on. Yeah, a lot of positives. I think we're not going to get carried away. I think South Africa had opportunities as well and probably didn't kick that well. But I think Ireland deserved it. I think at one stage in the first half, they had 16 phases. South Africa at one stage in their attack in the Ireland 22, and 14 of those phases was one pass out. So that'll tell you how direct and how physical and aggressive they were trying to be, run out all over Ireland. And we stood up to it there. We also stopped their maul. So, yeah, they're a brilliant side, South Africa, but Ireland, I think, did really well on Saturday. And I don't think either of us anyone's going to get carried away, because we're all cautious about what happened a couple of years ago. But it was a really pleasing performance to start off the November series.
Matt, just picking up on that, what impressed you most about the win?
Alan summed it up pretty well. I think what Ireland's done really well in the last 12 months is run the ball, and their attacking game has been sensational. They've been able to score so many points against opposition teams and play such positive rugby. We knew that wasn't going to be allowed by South Africa. So South Africa impose a game on their opposition that makes it really hard to play. They sort of cocoon you into this defensive little bubble, if you like. They shorten their defensive lineup, sprint up so there's not much space, and then their forwards crush you with scrummaging, mauling, and their work at the breakdown. And that were the areas that Ireland really excelled at. They lifted themselves up and they got down in the trenches with the South Africans. Alan said early in the game there was that first line out that South Africa won. They were going to maul, and the maul went nowhere. Now, remembering South Africa mauled tries against Argentina at will in the last two games of the championship. In Sydney, when they defeated Australia, they mauled them off the park, and they got nothing out of that. The scrummaging was absolutely extraordinary from Ireland right through, especially when, as Alan said, when Furlong went off. And to me, one of the great heroes that we haven't said a whole lot about was Andrew Porter. I thought his scrummaging, especially in the second half, was destructive. I don't think we all remember that scrum. I think it was the second scrum of the second half, just after Bealham came on, and it just exploded on his side of the scrum. He demolished the South African front row that had just come onto the field. Now, I can't recall that happening in recent years. It was a phenomenal display. The work at the breakdown. And I also think the unsung heroes were our second rowers. They're the power of the team. And while Esther Beth was magnificent, he's the best South African player on the field by a considerable margin, the Irish second rowers produced the power to allow their team to win. And then in those brief seconds, in that transition stage when they turned the ball over, they scored that absolutely incredible try from Mac Hansen. And in a maul, Josh van der Flier had the presence of mind to dive over the line. Like, all of those things were just wonderful. But I agree with Quinny. If Andre Pollard played that game, the chances are Ireland would have lost narrowly. So we can't get carried away. We just got to say it's a great win. It's a milestone. Let's take the energy. Let's take the momentum. it guarantees it's nothing except that we're there or thereabouts.
On the strength and depth in the front row, it's going to be absolutely crucial over the next 12 months, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an area we still need to get better. You'd love to, Tom O'Toole is someone who's played really well for Ulster as a tight head. He's a really good footballer around the field. We certainly need him kind of pushing now as well, putting pressure on that side of the scrum. Cian Healy, it's phenomenal. I think he's 119 caps now. We need backup. We need people challenging him as well and putting more pressure on there. So the more depth you can have, I want to see Ronan Kelleher back. I think Kelleher, Sheehan, incredibly dynamic duo, brilliant hooker. So, but Matt said it. Andrew Porter was brilliant, and I think that when his strength is and to switch over from tight head to loose head. Be playing in the same team with Furlong. I think that switch was done a couple of years ago to try and get both those guys in the field because they're brilliant footballers around the field. That was a real test for him as well at the weekend, and getting that in the bank as a player right across the board. But I think all the Irish players will be very mindful and conscious of that physicality. They would have been pretty sore on Sunday morning, but sometimes it's there's just wave after wave of these players coming forward, and you've just got to man up and help each other in those tackles. A lot of the time, as the South Africans were carrying their forwards, there's a guy latching on as well. So there's a serious impact of a second guy coming in supporting as well for South Africa, and they're very good at that. So Ireland took away their momentum, and they took it away in the maul as well. And they're the obvious things that jump out when you play South Africa is set piece, scrum, line out, and as those collision areas breakdown. And we'll France, we possibly meet France in a quarter final. If we get out of our group, we've got to play South Africa in the group. So potentially there's two incredibly physical tests coming up at a World Cup, and the more preparation you get for that, the better. It doesn't mean the next time you play them, you're going to have the same kind of parity or even get dominance there, but it means that it gives the players the confidence that there is a template there to work off and that they can do that. And, Ireland are a pretty physical side as well. And I think that's really important that they build on what they did at the weekend.
And Matt, we even saw Ireland try and move the ball, and I suppose a few opportunities went with begging as well. They
did. I think that's one of the key points, Stu. Ireland gained enough possession to play some attack. There were a few occasions, one in particular where Sexton threw a really good long overhead pass, and Robbie Balogun just wasn't ready for it, and it ended up being a knock on. I think, or went in a touch, but I think it was a knock on before that. They're the sort of things that Balogun's just got to be ready for, because Sexton's got such great vision. He saw the space through it, and they weren't ready for that play. Probably two or three other occasions where they did have opportunities to score. I think one part of this, Stu, is, that it's a multifaceted point I'm going to make. Last time Ireland played South Africa was 2017. I'm right, it wasn't 18, it was 17. Since then, Australia's played them 10 times. Now, that gives you an idea of why the world rankings are totally inaccurate. Australia can play South Africa 10 times, but Ireland have not played them in that whole period. It says something else. For Ireland's growth, they need to play South Africa more often, because everyone gets this out of proportion. How can we possibly take this physical beating at the World Cup? Going, well, Australia, they've beaten them in Australia every year. Well, they haven't. There's been every year. So I think it's 2014. Australia have beaten them in Australia every time they played. At least one occasion. They lost one this year and won one. But South Africa hadn't won for many years until this year. Now, Australia are no longer the powerhouse that they once were. So if Australia can match them, surely Ireland can. And that's about playing them more often. So the world calendar needs to change for Ireland's sake and for the North's sake, because you just get used to playing these teams. It's like the French clubs. 20 years ago, the Irish provinces really struggled against the French clubs because they were this giant unknown beast. You play them more often, you get used to them. Now at the the Irish teams rarely lose against the French club. It's going to be the same with the national side. I'm really confident that with more games against big teams like England, France, and South Africa, that Ireland will learn how to cope. And we showed on the Irish team showed on Saturday they're learning how to cope with that, and that came from matching their physicality, but it also our lineout was just immaculate. Like Paul O'Connell we can't pat him on the back enough, or John Fogarty, the scrum coach. Some of those lineouts, the South Africans were sending up 3 jumpers, a one-man lift and two pods. And the space for the Irish jumpers to get into to win the ball was minuscule. It was precise throwing, precise jumping and lifting, and the delivery was absolutely superb. So, there was and that is Ireland adapting to the challenge. And the more we play them, the more we adapt. So I'm pretty confident. Well, you can't be confident. There's no guarantees. I'm hopeful of the future. But looking forward, let's look past the World Cup. They talk of a World League, for want of a better term. So the November internationals aren't like they are now. If Ireland get to play South Africa more often, that is good for Irish rugby. That's good for the national teams, good for their development. And we learned so much on Saturday, we can learn if we play them more often.
Do you agree with Matt, Alan? And also, Alan, how much more is in Ireland? Like how much more can they improve?
Yeah, I agree with Matt. Obviously, that's happening in the URC now, so that will help players. I don't know what you can do. So, sometimes it's hard to figure out when you play a big, aggressive side like that. You just have to turn up every time, at every breakdown, at every situation. You can't have any time to switch off. Obviously, when you play other teams, it's not a conscious decision to switch off, but you can only, you can go into a breakdown 70, 75% a lot of the time with good technique. You don't have to smash anyone. People don't try and counter-ruck you because you're in a good body position. The South Africans every single time will try and smash you back out of that. So if you're at 75%, there's a chance you're going to be counter-rucked. That happened once or twice in the first half. They're so good at that. So again, when you play these teams, you can never switch off. It's really intense for the whole 80 minutes. And they're a very good side. They've always been physical, but this side are very, very good, and they're very well coached. They know what they're doing. Their positioning is very good. Their work rate, their line speed. So their whole game is built around putting massive pressure on the opposition. And they're really good at that. What can Ireland do better? Well, Ireland were fortunate in some ways that, the 2 tries they got, incredible try from Van der Fleer off that maul. Ireland got the momentum going forward. Deserve massive credit to forwards for that. The other one, obviously, Caelan Doris flicks the ball in field. They keep it alive. The execution, and they take the opportunity. And that's what Ireland are really good at. They've now become a team that if you give them half a chance, they can punish you. And that's what impresses me most about them. But we've got to be honest. We got a little bit of a break with that. The ball bounced right. Caelan Doris could have been in touch, but we executed. South Africa kind of turned the table a little bit then for, 10, 15-minute spell and clawed their way back into the game, which is understandable. And we were getting tired in the end. So what can we do better? Well, we only had 45% possession. So in an ideal world, Matt knows this as a coach, you'd love to be 50, 55, 60% possession. At least you have control of the ball a little bit more. Like I said it before the game, how do you stop South Africa? Well, you keep the ball for as long as you can and you play smart with it. But they're a very good side. It's easier said than done. So I think it even makes the performance and the results more impressive that Ireland, had only 45%. They only had 44% territory. So they didn't have a lot of time in that attacking zone. Whereas I just think without getting the exact numbers in the first half, it just felt South Africa were in our half a lot. And that's a great building block for Ireland because they were stressed, they were tested, they had to deal with a lot of that aggression. I hope it counts. They could play, Ireland, South Africa could play next week if it was a second test, and it could be a totally different game. It could be much more open. But 20 missed tackles, so obviously you want to keep that number low. South Africa, 28 missed tackles. So it just shows, no one would have said that either side had a bad defensive kind of run on Saturday. But when you kind of break down the stats, there's a couple of opportunities. I think one of the stats at halftime in the game was one line break in the game, even up to 60 minutes, and that was Ireland. It just showed that it was so attritional. So just hold on to possession a little bit more and be a bit smarter. But I think Ireland were a little bit rusty. They haven't played. They haven't played since New Zealand. One or two of those passes were to stick in the first half. Ireland could have got a little bit more opportunity in the wider channels. But I think when they look back at the video with that aggressive defence, particularly from Jesse Creel, and you remember the one Mapimpi on Hugo Keenan, if Hugo Keenan has a little tip-on pass or somebody on the inside, well, then it maybe stops that shooter. So maybe little things like that just to get a support player. But the ball was probably in the air a little bit long for both those. But look, Ireland, they ground out the results. I think they, on the balance of it, probably no one was arguing that they deserved to lose the game. It could have went the other way. And that's what made it such a great test game.
Matt, I just want to touch on a player who made his debut, Jimmy O'Brien, coming in there playing got to 50, 60 minutes at outside centre, played most of his career in the wing or at fullback. Such a big afternoon for him and his family. He did very well.
He did sensationally, Stu, didn't he? It was so sad seeing McCluskey go off because he waited so long for his opportunity. And then when he played, when he was on the field, I thought he was outstanding. He was having a great game. And, we all felt for him. You saw him going off with his arm injury. Thought, oh, no. And then Jimmy O'Brien was unknown because 48 hours beforehand, he was with the A side ready to play the New Zealanders. And here he is going to get 60 minutes of a test match. And he played really, really well. So if you look at the pluses that Alan just laid out, the Irish side, they know they can trust Jimmy O'Brien and McCluskey to play. They know that if they're required, they're up to the standard because they just proved that. And I suspect, we believe McCluskey's injury is not too bad. I think he might get another run. I think that'd be fantastic for him because we know what Bundyaki and Gary Ringrose and Robbie Henshaw could do because they're three of the best centres in the world. But when you have that, so on Saturday, as a classic example on Saturday, you have the worst case scenario. You've got two of our great centres out. Now, it's hardly happened in the last 7 or 8 years that's the case. What do? What if that's in a major game in the World Cup? We now know. So give these guys some more time. We also know Conor Murray got injured and we saw how good Jamison Gibson Park is, how he put pace on the game and that the South Africans fatigued under that pace that I think led to the creation of the space that scored the tries. Because Jamison Gibson Park played a major role. We learned that. We learned about Finlay Boolan. These are such good things for us. What I hope happens now is that in the selection for the Fijian side and the Wallaby side, the Irish sides, that is to play against those teams, there are some brave selections at this time in the preparation for the World Cup. Ireland will beat Fiji. The Wallabies are trying their heart out. I as Australian born and bred, and I learnt my rugby there. I got to say I'm really proud of the way they're playing. They are not the most talented team in the world, but they're trying their heart out. And they every now and then they'll do what we saw. They push France. If Ireland go out and put 4, let's not say gambles, but 4 young players against the Wallabies, and they lose, it's not the end of the world. If Ireland lose a game here and there by blooding a few kids, not all 15, but just a few of these guys, giving them more time, then behind their much more experienced senior players, and it doesn't work out perfectly. It's still a plus. Here's the other part. From what we saw Jimmy O'Brien and McCluskey and Finlay Boolan do on Saturday, we've got to have faith in this team below. They've spent a lot of time sitting with New Zealand and South Africa. They didn't perform against New Zealand, the New Zealand 15. That's okay. That's a learning experience. But we've got to have faith in them in the key positions to give them some time. So I think it was a huge, huge plus in every area on Saturday. Momentum, belief, all that. But in giving those young guys time and seeing how well they played, that's got to give us faith to give some more of them some more time so that when we come to the World Cup and there is a problem, Let's remember New Zealand in the final of their World Cup at home 2015. They'd lost Dan Carter and Aaron Cruden, their 2 starting 10s. They had to go to their number 3 10 in the final of the Test match. We got a plan like that for our games. That's the way you plan. You might need it. Plan for the worst, hope for the best. But Saturday should give us hope that we can do that.
Alan, Matt's talked about Fiji on Saturday. Was the big talking point will be at number 10. Looks like Joey Carbery will come in, hopefully for his sake to start. But, that back up to Johnny Sexton, plenty of talking points. Jack Crowley, Kieran Frawley, obviously injured, but such a big talking point over the next 12 months. Which way do you see it?
Well, Matt said that we're going to beat Fiji on Saturday. And we should. But I just think some of these types of games, it depends what kind of team Andy Farrell picks, obviously. And you're asking about Joey Carbery. The Fijians can be sensational. I think they scored a couple of great tries against Scotland. Scotland gave Scotland a fright early on in the game, and then Scotland kept it pretty. They overpowered them, and their technique and their structure, beat them. It's very difficult for those Fijians coming together like that, but they've incredible talent, and you saw what they could. They probably nearly did to Australia and Wales the last World Cup, but then they played Uruguay and they lost that game in the pool stage as well. So you just don't know. If you give them a sniff, you give them hope. And these are the kind of banana skins that, again, it's a kind of a test. And we look back at the A game last Friday night, where there was a lot of guys who were playing for opportunities, maybe trained with the Irish squad all week, the Irish coaches, and got a bit of a lesson off that New Zealand select side. They were brilliant, and it was a very difficult night for them. I'm not saying the same is potentially can happen on Saturday, but they have a lot of X-factor players, and you've just got to be careful, and you've got to be physical as well. But you start Carbery, I think. I think Johnny Sexton took a few knocks. We know how important he is, and every chance we get to give Joey Carbery more games time out in the field as a 10, the better, with the World Cup in mind next year, and Johnny Sexton departing the scene. But I'd probably go, and we'll talk about this next week, I'd probably be starting him against Australia. Give him more of a test. A really good side who, as Matt said, they were brilliant on Saturday night in France. They lost by a point. Very unlucky that they didn't win that game. But I'd be looking at maybe playing him against Australia. I know Johnny won't want that. He'll want to play, and he wants to get out in the field as much as he can. But it's just about, we know what Johnny can do, and we know he can do it, and he will do it. And I think the more game time Joey Carbery gets, because his season has been quite stop-start, hasn't it? And he's been behind the pack in Munster. That's changed so much, even in the couple of games he's played. So, but look, that's for next week. I'd be starting him this week. I'd be starting Hugo Keenan, Balogun again. Balogun didn't get any ball at the weekend. He needs more game time. Who else from the pack do you start? Caelan Doris, Van der Fleer, O'Mahony. You try and change it up a little bit. But you've got to be careful here and keep a little bit of strength and not completely change 15 players. So I think it's because these guys a lot of them will get a break after the November series. They'll probably get a week off. I don't know. They'll get another break at Christmas. So I wouldn't be making wholesale changes. Maybe half and half.
Matt, where do you see Ireland's second choice fly half? I think if I'm right, you agree with Alan. Joey should start the next 2 games. Is that right?
Well, if you look at in the short of it, yes. Frawley's injured. He's seems to be the heir apparent that they're looking at. If Frawley was fit, I think there is a different conversation to be had, but he's not. So I would start Joey. If Frawley was fit, I would be giving Frawley the start. I'm not sure Joey's the answer. I think Joey's had so many opportunities, and he really hasn't taken command. Now, I know he's had terrible injuries, but at a certain point, if the other guy's looking and showing potential, you've got to give him a go. And I think we're getting very, very close to that point. I feel for Joe because if you look at his career, when Johnny got injured the last season in the Six Nations and Joey played against France, it was something like only his 4th start against a Tier 1 nation. And therein lies the problem. You can't just give these guys games against Fiji and Italy and Samoa and Romania and so on, and then say, oh, on Saturday we're playing New Zealand, you're in, and expect them to take control and run it. It's just not real. We've got to give them time in big games. And that's what the November international is about to me. Personally, I would, if I was Andy Farrell, I'd sit down with Johnny, and I know he'd hate it. I know he'd whinge and complain, and I understand why he's a competitor, and say, Johnny, we're going to use you in the Six Nations. You're going to play 4 of the 5 in the Six Nations. But right now, you're going to be put in cotton wool, and we're going to give the other guys a go. I agree with Alan. If you make 100 changes, change the term, that's wrong. They don't function. I think there's opportunities to change the back row. I'd like to see Conan and Ryan Beard start in the back row. I'd also like to see, Loftman at least on the bench, Jeremy Loftman at least on the bench for one of these games. I think he can put pressure to be a solid backup at loose head prop. The others, Beelum should start, especially this week, if Furlong's out. And Furlong to me is as important to Ireland as Sexton. Without him, we are in trouble because we just haven't got that depth. So we've got to find that depth. And here's our chance to give Finlay Beelum some more opportunity. Believe in himself as much as anything else. Like, he would have got so much self-belief after surviving, and then not just surviving, but coping extremely well against the South Africans for the whole half. He hasn't done that. Because he hasn't been given the opportunity. So I just think these next 2 games are great opportunities to give some key guys time on the field. Craig Casey's another one that I hope gets time, gives some backup. Of course, Connor's just, has quite a serious injury, a muscle injury that might keep him out for a period of time. That could happen at a World Cup. Connor's moving on in his age. Who's the next one? If it's Casey, let's give him time in the saddle so he knows that. And this is the opportunity. There's no sheep stations riding on these next 2 games. These are you can never have a friendly, but they're not. There's no trophies for them. Six Nations is coming up. That's important. Then the World Cup. That's important. This is the time to do it.
Alan, do you agree with Matt there? Do you think Joey has had enough chances at 10?
Well, he hasn't had enough chances at 10 if he's only played 4 games before last year. So that's not a criticism what Matt is saying. But I think we are where we are now. I think, he needs more games. And I think he needs games against, top opposition. He needs to be stressed under pressure as well. He's come on off the bench in a lot of the great wins for Ireland over the last number of years. I always think back to that moment when he came off the bench in Chicago, and I was like, oh God, how's Joey going to do here for the last number of minutes? But, he did perfectly. He wasn't really tested as much. He was, so young and inexperienced. I think was that his first cap, second cap?
First cap, I think.
Yeah, it was his first cap. It was incredible. What a place and a way to win your first cap. But look, I think there's never any question mark about Joey Carbery's footballing ability or skill level. I think it's the temperament and it's the composure and the control and Sexton is so physical. He can take the ball to the line. His kicking game is on the money. He can see space. He's a real vision for what way the game is going, and he's obviously that fighting kind of temperament and spirit as well, which makes him so powerful. But I think Joey probably needs more opportunities, and for one reason or another, he hasn't got them. So I don't think Joey's ever started against one of the big nations, and we've gone, oh God, that's been a disaster. No. Not that I can think of.
No.
So
you're right.
He hasn't gone through that position where we've kind of written him off. But the time has come to see more of him. Consistency. Yeah. The word consistency has been mentioned a lot with Joey, and I think he's a wonderful player. He's a great young fella. He's a brilliant attitude. He trains unbelievably well. He's really positive in everything he does, and that's what the Munster lads and the Irish lads say. So everyone wants him to do well, and we know his ability. But Frawley is kind of chomping at the bit now. But Matt, as well, it'd be brilliant. Every team would love to have 3 or 4 players chomping at the bit in each position. More pressure, more pressure, more pressure. It makes a strong squad, and you can tweak things. And players don't really get dropped nowadays, do they? They get rotated. So, yeah, look, obviously it'd be brilliant if Frawley came through too, or even Harry Byrne came back in the scene, Jack Crowley. It'd be lovely position for Andy Farrell next summer to say, well, geez, Jack Crowley's been brilliant for Munster. They've finished strong, or you know, Harry Byrne has come back in with Leinster and he's been brilliant too. And just put it in your head that these guys, if someone gets injured, but you know, it'll be interesting, and I hope Joey gets the opportunity in the next couple of weeks.
Stewie, on the converse side of that, Sexton is still the king. You know, what we're talking about, Joey, in the young
you forget that sometimes. Yeah,
Sexton is still so good. I mean, it's unbelievable. Sunday night, I was watching the NFL, and I'm watching Tampa Bay in the last second. Here's Tom Brady, steps back in the last second of play, throws this touchdown pass. Tampa win, the champion. And I just thought, that's Sexton. That's Sexton. At his age, he is still delivering, and he would start for Australia. He would start for England. He'd start for Scotland. He'd start for everyone except maybe New Zealand and France. He is still a great player. And I had him written off in 2009. That's Johnny's had a great career, but he's finished. He's not finished. And that is a great credit to him. The other part is, it's worrying because when he's on the field, Ireland are a different team. And that's not a criticism of the other boys. When you've got an all-time great,
but you know what, Matt?
That's an all-time. Sorry, mate.
You know what? Maybe Ireland just needs, when it happens. Need is the wrong word. When it happens, they're just going to have to get on with it. Maybe guys will be a little bit, maybe come out of their shells a bit more. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe they will grow a little bit, and they'll have to step up, sink or swim job. And we may have a position of a couple of years where there's a bit of chopping and change, and we've just got to keep finding. Sometimes brilliant players in a position don't stunt the growth of other players, but they stop opportunity.
For sure.
Because Johnny never wants to not play for Ireland. Every time he's fit, he'll even be grumpy. He'll want to play against Fiji on Saturday, which shows his temperament. So, you know, we're going to get to that point where there'll be no more debating about Johnny Sexton. You know, when he hangs up the boots, the others will just have to get in there and do it. Absolutely.
Well, it's going to be an interesting game on Saturday, and also for the next 12 months, and see how the battle of the number 2 fly half goes. But Alan, I want to stick with you here. Tomorrow night, your old team Munster take on South Africa A team. What an occasion that's going to be.
Yeah, it's going to be brilliant. I think Munster have been, you know, they've had a tough start to the season, and they could do with a lift for themselves and kind of, you know, maybe get a bit of a feel-good factor going with themselves. It's going to be a great occasion with the game being on in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. It's sold out. They are stretched kind of quite thinly again with their selections. It's good to see, you know, Mike Haley's back, Simon Zebo. There's Kieran McDonald is starting. Gavin Coombs has come back from the Irish squad, which, you know, he'll not be pleased to you know, not be considered for Fiji, but it's an opportunity for him. I think Anton Frisch in the centre. We've seen it one cameo off the bench against Cardiff in the first game. I think he's an exciting player. So it's going to be tough. South Africa have picked the South African A team have picked a very strong side. There's 14 full internationals in their 23. A lot of big names and a lot of powerful young players as well. But the whole occasion should be amazing, and I hope we see some of the kind of historical brilliant nights when Munster played international sides. You know, they had a brilliant win against Australia. That night against New Zealand in 2008 was a special night. The opening of the stadium. They could have won that game. It would have been a phenomenal achievement for you know, a second string Munster side at the time. And then the win, obviously, I think it was 2010 against Australia. They're special moments for the players as well. It's a very strong South African A side, so it's going to be a tough task for them. But let's hope there's a brilliant atmosphere. I'm sure there will. There'll be great excitement there, and it's something to certainly look forward to. It's a unique occasion with it being on in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, first rugby game ever in the stadium.
Yeah, it's going to be a great spectacle. Matt Allen had 2 bites there, Munster beating Australia there. How are you feeling about that?
Oh, mate, you just got to wear it. Mate, we used to say Munster played a kicking game in those days. They kicked heads and balls, but they and they did. Mate, you used to get the Wallaby guys. You talk to them, they were shocked at what they used to get at Munster. You talk to these old guys, and especially when they know my connections with Ireland, they talk to you. The boys that went down there, even in the 90s, Munster beat. Oh, gee, it was when Greg Smith was coaching. It must have been 96. They went down there and they got the absolute daylight for them. I think Gullif was still playing, was leading the charge in those days.
Claw was there as well.
Yeah. They were telling some stories, you know. And there's 2 parts to this. It is a tremendous tradition at Munster, the way they rise against international teams. And the Wallabies started that. I think it was 66 or 67. 67 was the first time an Irish province beat an international side, and Munster beat the Wallabies down there. Ken Ging, the old manager from Leinster, played in that team and used to remind me every single day of my 5 years at Leinster that Munster beat Ireland in 1967, but beat the Wallabies in 1967. But this is a phenomenal tradition. You know, I remember just after the tragedy of Axel dying and that great gesture of placing the number 8 jersey, you know, and I remember sitting there, I was almost in tears watching it, you know, and all of us who knew and loved Anthony just couldn't believe it. And this tradition continues. On paper, South Africa should win and win well. But that's never been the case. That's never been the case in these games. There's this beautiful tradition and a great inspiration to the red jersey. And maybe this is something that might spark the Munster season. You know, that's still a quality. There's a lot of good, and I shouldn't say kids, good young men that I've really liked the look of in that Munster side. Here's your day in this historic venue that is an absolute legend in Munster, to play in this unique venue against a great side in your jersey that you wanted to play in since you were a little boy. I mean, all those things just add up. And, you know, sport's not just tactics and technical, it's spirit and emotion as well. And that's going to be a really, really emotional night down there. I think it's fabulous opportunity for the Munster boys. Yeah,
as you say, Matt, fabulous for the game. 2 points, lads, I just want to get your take on before we go. Alan, I'll come to you first. Argentina beating England. What about England, Eddie Jones? Jeez, they don't seem to be too happy over there.
No, it wasn't a big surprise because I think I saw, I don't know if Matt agrees, but we saw moments of Argentina in the Rugby Championship where I was incredibly impressed with them. They switched off on occasions, but Jeannie Mac, they're so competitive. Their skill levels are right up there. You know, and they won in Christchurch against the All Blacks. I think they showed glimpses throughout that Rugby Championship that when they get it right, they can be incredibly dangerous. Scored brilliant tries against South Africa in those 2 games as well. So very exciting, dangerous team. I think it was physical on Saturday. I think England are quite blunt in their approach. I think they're trying to, you know, overpower people. He's made so many changes in the last couple of years, Eddie Jones, to these players. I think there was some crazy stat that there was a vast number of players have you know, less than 5 caps under Eddie Jones. They're in for a couple of games, they're gone, they're missing, they get a chance. There's another guy in. There's a lot of chopping and changing, but I wouldn't rule out England being ready at the World Cup. They have plenty of good players. I think I saw some English commentators and rugby people giving out about the selections and the way England were playing, the type of game they were playing. And remember, Eddie Jones would have had a crack a few times of Ireland over the years about them being pragmatic and kicking way too much. Well, he's gone out and his teams kick the ball incredibly a lot as well, and they try and overpower teams. So I think they still have some very, very dangerous players, but they need to find their mojo a little bit, and that was a bit of a hammer blow, and it just kind of heaps the pressure on Eddie Jones. But credit to Argentina, very good side, and they could be a side to be reckoned with at the World Cup as well.
Yeah, you never know how they'll get on. They always seem to peak for the World Cups. Matt, lastly, we spoke about it last week. Finn Russell was out. Now he's in with Adam Hastings. Sadly injured for him. Finn Russell's back in the Scottish camp and could well feature against New Zealand.
Very difficult situation for Gregor, isn't it? He's, I feel for him. As I said before on the show, Stuart, my information was that it was the players that drove this because of Hogg and Finn Russell being the senior players, the Lions, their leaders on the field and captain, as Hogg was, seemingly having two rules. And the straw that broke the camel's back was when they went out, that the team was told, we can have a couple of beers after we play Italy, but we're going only a couple, and then back to the hotel and we're getting ready for the next game. And when Russell and Hogg and Ali Price, it was at the time, said, no, we're going out. There's a rule for everyone, but not for us. And the players, the rest of the team said, listen, that's not on. We're either all in this or we're not. And Gregor's made the decision to not in Ali Price, but to shift the other two and to move them. That, I believe, was really welcome within the squad, and the squad was quite happy with it. Now, obviously, there's been some injuries. Now, what we don't know, because we're not privy to these conversations, is whether Finn Russell's sort of said, okay, look, I see what you're saying. I admit I'm wrong. Let's move on. I don't know. But it's a tricky situation for the Scottish squad and for Gregor to manage. There's no doubting Russell's talent. There's no doubting that. That's not what we're talking about. He is a phenomenal player. But he's an individual playing a team sport, and that can sometimes get under the skin of the rest of the team, and that seems to be what's occurred. Now, whether that bridge can be mended, I don't know. But it does cause a problem. Now, there's a different leadership there with Richie as captain. I think he's a good captain. I think he's a good choice because he's a tough, hard dude, does his work, doesn't shirk anything. And from all reports off the field, he's the same sort of bloke. Hard-working, dedicated, and just giving to the team. So maybe he'll pull him into line a bit. I'm not sure. Either way, it's not ideal for Gregor, who made a brave call, but he's had to go against that call. It's how the team reacts to that. We'll know on Saturday. You can't hide that sort of stuff. It comes out in your play. It comes out in your dedication to the game and how much effort you're prepared to put in for the jersey. And right now you can say a lot of things. Scotland lost against the Wallabies, but they really put in that day. That was a very good game. And you can tell by the defence and the breakdown. That's how you judge character in the team. And they really worked hard at that. It was a turnover. At the turnover, they almost got the opportunity to win it. But not a good situation for Scotland.
Alan,
do you want to quickly pick up off the back of that?
Yeah, well, they're going to have a real test on Saturday, on Sunday. Sorry, it's on Sunday against New Zealand. But I think he's given him a rap on the knuckles again. He's probably given him one more chance, and sometimes you get a reaction out of players. So it's up to Finn Russell now. We should mention Italy. They beat Samoa 49-17 in Padua as well at the weekend. They were absolutely brilliant. I wasn't sure whether Samoa were really poor, but some of the tries they scored were incredible. So they might give you a little test, Matt, on Saturday. They're playing the Wallabies, and Saturday the Italians. That's on in Florence as well. So a unique kind of venue, but who knows?
There's been some photos of the Wallabies out eating pasture and having ice cream already. So, mate, there is no team on the planet that can lose an unlosable like the Wallabies at the moment. They will find a way. They have led. I saw the stat. It's something over their last 12 test matches. They've led 4 of them inside the last 3 minutes and lost them all, as they did on Saturday. They're just as likely to underestimate the Italians and not put in. I think the Italians are really coming forward on your point, Quinny. Remember, they beat Wales in Cardiff and they played some really good rugby since. And then they're certainly improving markedly under the new regime. So, yeah, the Wallabies have to do it. To be fair to the Wallabies, they are not the most... The Wallaby 10, 12 and 13 are not talented, but they're trying their guts out. The whole team's trying their guts out. And with Michael Hooper back in the fold, they are doing some good things. They're not the Wallaby teams of the past, and they'll lose the games that you don't expect them to. But I think when they come to Ireland, what they are doing is they're playing really entertaining rugby. You know, like I can criticise them for a lot of things, but they're trying to play the game in our tradition, which is a running ball. The try they scored against France, I think, will win try of the year. It was a magnificent try. But they can lose the unlosable like that. Easy.
They can, yeah. And there's a couple of crackers of games, isn't there, Saturday as well? Wales, Argentina, that's going to be a real test for Wales. France, South Africa, then Saturday night.
Yeah, great games, yeah.
And Scotland, New Zealand, Sunday.
Yeah, plenty of rugby to look forward to. Lads, as always, thanks for joining me. And of course, don't forget to tune in on Saturday at 12 o'clock as Ireland take on Fiji. But first on Virgin Media 2, tomorrow night, Munster take on South Africa Day. Should be a good one. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Cheers.